Hey, it's Kevin Lawton with the New Warehouse Podcast, bringing you a new episode today. And on today's episode, I am going to be joined by Ignacio Galiana, who is the co-founder and CEO at Verve Motion. And Verve Motion is focused on improving ergonomics overall through exoskeletons and exosuits. And we're going to hear a little bit more about that. We're going to talk about some of the ergonomic challenges within the warehousing industry. We're going to talk about Ignacio's passion for ergonomics and how he came to found this company. And also, how do you start to bring technologies like Verve Motion into your safety programs within the warehouse? So, Ignacio, welcome to the show. How are you, sir?
It's great to be here, Kevin. Thanks for having me.
Definitely happy to have you on. Happy to talk about this. I think it's something that's extremely important for workers in the warehousing industry and workers in general, too. I know you focus on more industries than just the warehouse, but obviously, the New Warehouse Podcast, we love the warehouse here. So, we're going to talk a little bit about that angle and that side of things. But before we get started and start talking about some of these challenges and things of that nature, why don't you give us some of your background and how you came to ultimately found this company Verve Motion.
Absolutely. So I did my PhD back in Spain, really focused on human-machine interaction, how to develop new technologies to enable a better experience and interaction with virtual environments, with remote environments, safe for applications like surgery. As part of that, I went to Harvard for a collaboration. That was about 12 years ago. It's wild to think it was that early. And I met Connor Walsh, faculty member there. He was just starting his lab and wanting to develop new kind of wearable devices to help people perform better, allow people to do more, but with a real focus around making those technologies practical. And that's what started a lot of the technologies that then became Verve Motion. So a day after finishing my PhD, I came back to Boston to work at Harvard. I didn't even go to my graduation. I knew what that's what was next for me, and we started working on those technologies initially for military applications. We had a DARPA contract to help soldiers who carry often 100-pound rucksacks through long distances perform better. And through the course of it, I started figuring out what would be the first application that we focus on. And through that, I visited many job sites in the US, started going to automotive manufacturing, construction, warehousing, distribution, 3PLs across the country, interviewed hundreds of people. And there was a common thread a lot around millions of people doing really tough jobs, right? When you think about picking, selecting inside a warehouse, it's a really tough job. And it just became very clear that we could have a huge impact for those people with the technologies we were working on in the lab. And that's what, went back, targeted lifting, because that's a lot of what we saw back until then. We had focused on walking and brought prototypes, put it on workers, saw their reaction, kind of their eyes popped up, like this can really change how I work. And it just became very clear that we could have that impact. So that's how we started.
Very interesting, and I think it's very interesting too. So you skipped your graduation, just got to work, right? And I think that's kind of
Yeah,
like a testament to
let's get back to work.
some real some real passion there in a sense. So I'm curious. I mean, how did this maybe? I guess how did this align with like your passion and where did it really kind of click for you in a sense that you love ergonomics and you really want to
Yeah.
focus your work on this.
Yeah, I think it was a couple of key realizations. So one, when I was doing all those job site visits across warehousing, distribution, met with hundreds of people that were, working in a warehouse, driving pallet jacks with thousands of pounds in the back,
Mm,
putting them on the back of trucks, and through all those conversations, there was a very common thread around, hey, when I go back home, when I go into my car, I just feel body aches. I feel like, I'm fatigued. Maybe I had an injury a couple months ago. There were a lot of common threads around just people not, feeling their best when they
Mm.
reach back home, and a lot of people having had injuries in their past, and so that just clicked on me on like we should be able to make this job easier for the millions of people that are doing it in the US and abroad. And so that was one. Second, I guess since I was in university, I spent a lot of time thinking about how to improve human performance, how to
Mm.
enable people to do more through my research, but also in sports, in life in general. And many times it's like that time where you take a break, where you take some rest, when you sleep well, when you are not close to being injured, that you perform your best. And so
Mm.
it was just like counterintuitive at the time, where sometimes to perform your best and be able to do better, you just need to move more efficiently, stay away from injuries, be more mindful of your movements. And that's what ergonomics is all about, right? In many ways. So it was just that realization that if we take ergonomics into account and prevent injuries, we can be better both at work and outside of work, and ultimately perform more efficiently and just better.
Mm. Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. And I think there is such a, like you said, I mean, there's millions of people that are doing difficult work, right? And taxing
Right.
work. Not only, obviously, there's people that are doing things that are very mentally taxing and from an intelligence perspective, but then also from a physical perspective, just getting the things
Yeah.
that, we use every day. There's a lot of physical movement and work that goes into making that happen. And I think you really said a key thing there, which I think when I think about, warehouse employees or these employees that are doing physical type of work, it's one thing to be doing that work during the day while you're at work and, getting through that. But then, at the end of the day, how do you feel, right? Like, can you actually go home and enjoy your family, enjoy your kids, just, feel like okay? Or do you go home and you feel like, man, I just want to like lay down on the couch and, that's
Yeah.
it, like for me for the day until I got to go do this whole thing again. Right. So, there's a lot of opportunity there to improve that human performance, as you mentioned. So, tell us a little bit about, because you guys had this study recently done, right? And
Mhm.
tell us a little bit about from the warehousing industry specifically, right? Because that's what we're focused on here. How big is this problem for the warehousing industry?
Yeah, it's a big problem. And there's a couple of stats where this stat often surprises people, where
Mm.
a warehouse worker lifts anywhere from 30 to 50,000 pounds in a single day. And
Wow.
and that's a lot, right? We were all watching the Olympics recently, kind of a few months ago. The
Yeah.
athletes in the warehouses are doing just something incredible every day.
Mm.
That leads to injuries, lost productivity, and retention issues. There's a lot of turnover, right, when we think about
Mm.
warehousing distribution. So the injuries alone cost U.S. companies about $13 billion a year. So a
Wow.
billion dollar, more than $1 billion per month. Uh, I think the stat is about every 7 seconds an injury happens at work, and most of those injuries, when you do the Pareto analysis, come
Mm.
from overexertion. And in that bucket of overexertion is a lot of the back injuries, repetitive lifting, moving quickly in a warehouse, lifting over 1,000 items every day. So when you add all those problems up of injuries, lost productivity, and days lost out of work, and retention turnover, it becomes a problem of over $60 billion just in the U.S.
Mm.
Perhaps 4 times that when you think about the world. And that's only looking at warehousing, distribution, material moving, handling. And if you ask any warehouse leader what are some of the top things in their mind, you typically hear keeping their workers, wanting to work there,
Mm.
everything about retention, turnover, reducing that as much as they can, keeping their workforce safe. It's usually up there as well, and becoming predictable, productive, where you can almost predict how much throughput is gonna come every day.
Mm.
Every time you have an injury or someone leaves, it just creates that's an unpredictable event that you then have to correct for. So it's a lot of that, and then you look at all the different industries, and you really see that all around. Food and beverage is up there in terms of number of repetitions per day and weight lifted.
Right.
The carriers, right? People that deliver packages to our houses every day. That's another one. Those industries, liquor distribution. You think about auto parts. So it's a lot of the heavy items on the floor inside big buildings that people move. So really the topic of this podcast around warehousing distribution.
Mm. Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. And I think what's interesting there is when you said you look at the Pareto in a sense, usually it's these back injuries, right, from overexertion. And
Right.
I think, one of the biggest challenges there is that if you're an operations leader, warehouse manager, supervisor, whatever the case may be, or even a peer, right, it's difficult. It's not really a visible type of injury, right? Like if you think about, somebody gets a cut from a box knife or something like that. Okay, like that's
Mm-hmm.
something like you can very easily kind of see something is going to happen, or if somebody hits their head or something like that. Like it's very visible, but these kind of overexertion and back injuries, they build up over time in a sense, right? And a lot of times too,
Yeah.
I think that the employees, they don't really vocalize that they're experiencing this to management, right? It's kind
Right.
of almost like I think like culture wise, it's almost like everybody's like, oh yeah, I get back pain, right? Like it's just like
Yeah.
accepted,
Just
right?
part of their job. It
So
comes with it. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So I think that it's a even bigger challenge in that sense too, because you don't have necessarily the visibility into it, I guess, like to be able to
Right.
prevent that. And it's very difficult to, you can tell somebody the best lifting practices, 1,000 times, but a lot of times it's not really natural to have the best lifting practices. So I guess tell us a little bit about, how do you now go about addressing some of these challenges, because you're taking like a technology aspect to it, right? Where I think like, traditionally it's been about, putting up signs that say this is a proper lifting technique, telling your employees,
Yeah.
oh, lift with your legs, not your back, and things like that. And, some equipment integration there too as well. But, from a technology perspective, how do you kind of come in and how do you help these operations start to work technology into their overall safety program?
Right, that's a great question, Kevin. And you mentioned a couple of things in there on
Mm.
which is kind of like what we realized when we were starting around. There's just not a lot of feedback, and
Mm.
when there is feedback, it's usually a little bit disconnected for what that person actually went through during their day or the months leading kind of to that event. Um, that's one. And two, you mentioned that there's like there's just a lot of hard work, and that's just hard to eliminate. You just have to move in certain ways, right? If you want to take a box from here and put it there,
Yeah.
in some ways, and that inspired our solution in many ways. In that we knew we had to address those two gaps. The first one around feedback. Our system has sensors in it that measure how someone moves through the course
Mm.
of the day. And so now you can break down a lot of those insights into what's really the issue that we have in this job function, in this new hire class, in this site. And every site is different, every person is different. So
Yeah.
once you put together all that data, you can actually give feedback that matters and is relevant and kind of resonates with the operators. So it might be someone may need to lift more with their legs, like kind of you just
Mhm.
said, but maybe other people are twisting a lot every time they're grabbing a box, and so it's like around orienting your body in a way that
Mm.
that allows them to move better. And we have all those analytics and data to that our customer safety teams and our customer success teams on the floor can use to do that coaching more effectively. And then the second is you're still going to have to move 30, 50,000 pounds a day, right? That's not going to go away. And so our solution has those sensors, but it can also act. It can remove some of the weight for you. So every
Mm.
time you lift something up, it makes that item about 30 to 40% lighter. And it does that. The system has motors, actuators in it. We use the sensors to understand what's going on. And then that motor provides a force in parallel to their back and their hips to make it actually easier and lighter to lift that object. When you add all that up over the course of a day, you end up removing tens of thousands of pounds. And we can actually measure that every millisecond. So we measure how much the system is removing from someone's body plus how someone's moving. And I
Mm.
think to date, we've offloaded about 500 million pounds from people's backs, which, it just
Oh,
adds
wow.
up pretty quickly when you're
Yeah.
doing those jobs. And
Mm.
that's where the impact comes.
Mm. Very interesting. And I think, the fact that it's reactive in that way, and obviously reducing the I guess feeling of the weight itself, right, by 30 to 40%, I think
Right.
is a huge impact and takes away a lot of that strain. So I guess question there, I mean, does that then allow someone to be able to lift something heavier than they otherwise wouldn't be able to do? Is that work that way or
Right.
not?
In principle, it could, right?
Mm.
You're adding an extra muscle in some ways to that person's back and hip, but that's not kind of really what we see when we implement the technology.
Yeah.
Our customers have to move the same type of items before and
Mm.
after, and it's all around. They want to keep their operation as is. They just want to be more efficient. They want to be, they want to remove injuries as much as they can, and they want to keep people on their jobs. So
Yeah.
when we partner with our customers, there is a lot of before deployment. There is some communication that we do together with our customers around. We're not going to change the job types, the job effort. We're not going to ask you to do more. This
Mm.
technology is here to help you do your job better, feel better at the end of the day, and be able to go home and do sports, play with your kids, everything that you want to do outside of job. So it's really around that investment in well-being, safety, and efficiency that pays off. But we're not asking people to do more.
Yeah, yeah, interesting. Yeah, yeah. I was just curious, if it gives you like superhuman strength or something. It can go lift a car over your head, maybe, or something like that. But I think it's
Yeah,
super interesting, and obviously, a very important challenge to be addressing, right? And so now, I guess, tell us a little bit about. You kind of told us a little bit there about the sensors and the reactivity to understanding the weight and essentially giving you an additional muscle, I think is the way you described it there.
hmm,
So, tell us a little bit about from the user perspective, what is the feeling like? I mean, is it like
yeah.
it's kind of it goes on your back, right? I mean, does it feel like wearing a backpack? How is that kind of comfort level to now have this additional apparatus on you for, an 8-hour shift? What is that feeling like, and how does it kind of adapt to the movements and just comfortability of the user?
Yeah. And going back to, yeah, totally. And going back to your point around superhuman like nature. Um,
Yeah.
Back in the day, a lot of people started to engineers tried to develop exoskeletons for decades,
Mm.
and it was really around how do we make people superhuman? How do we give them, live that car kind of experience?
Mm.
And for us, it was like completely different point of view around. Let's not try to build Iron Man. Let's just make something practical for these people that are doing all the hard jobs, right? So for us, it's about giving someone that 30 to 40% extra that allows them to be more efficient, avoid injuries, and go back the next day feeling, uh, you know, uh,
Mm.
recovered in many ways. So when you we have warehouses of different sizes and so on. Some of them have hundreds of units at a single site, and so the experience is around. You go in. There is a kind of rack with storage station, location of the
Mm.
units. You put it on. Kind of feels like you're putting on a hydration vest or a small backpack. It's very lightweight. Put it on in seconds. There's a couple of components that wrap around your thighs. And then on the back, there is a component that again goes in parallel to your back and splits to its thigh. So it's kind of acting as that external muscle. You turn it on, the system automatically adjusts to you, to your height, to how you put it on that day. Every time you put on the system, it's just a little bit different, right?
Mm.
Things are not always exactly in the same place. So the system takes care of that automatically when you turn it on. And then that's it. You go on around your day. And we almost want to like fade to the background where I guess the analogy I sometimes use is we want to become like, we kind of feel a little bit like power steering in a car where you don't really know
Okay.
it's there every time you turn, but then you grab an old car and it's like, what is this? I don't want to drive this thing. It doesn't rotate, right? So that's the feeling we get. And most of the times is when you turn it off and then you lift that item, it's like, oh, wow, that's what it was doing for
Mm.
me. That clicks in the operator's selector's, kind of head. The other thing is the system again has sensors and motors, so it's adapting to the way people move in a warehouse automatically. And the
Mm.
operator can choose different modes of assistance, which might be different levels of assistance, might be controllers that are optimized for a couple of different job functions at a site, and so that becomes very natural too. It's almost like more customized to that individual as well. And then at the end of the day, they take it off. It takes 10 to 20 seconds to do that, similar to a hydration vest again. Put it in there, put it in the storage location, and then we get all
Mm.
that data analytics that we can use for feedback and coaching. We also set up at our customer sites leaderboards, TVs. A lot of people in these
Mm.
environments like competition, right? And so you can look at top 5 weight of loaded, safest movers,
Oh.
etc. And that creates that almost like culture and competition around moving safely and appreciating kind of the value and the benefits that come with it.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. And I love that idea to put kind of like the gamification in there a little bit that helps to kind of
Yeah, right.
reinforce the utilization of that, and making sure people are using it because hey, like they want to be at the top, or whatever the case may be. But
Yeah,
you mentioned kind of the benefits there, and obviously the main focus, right, is making these workers safer in a sense, preventing injury. But I have to imagine there's other additional benefits that maybe the worker sees, or the operation or the business sees. So tell us a little bit about, some of those, I guess, benefits that also come from that, aside from the injury prevention.
yeah. So the injury retention piece, that's pretty straightforward. We've measured it
Hmm.
over at many customers. It ends up being somewhere between 65 to 85% reduction of back injuries, which is usually more than what our customers expect kind of going in. And it comes from that repetition, right? When you eliminate this day by day, that's kind of the impact that you will see. But then what we also see is an increased productivity at the end of the day. And that's not a consequence of asking people to do more or anything like that. It's just a consequence of not being fatigued. So when you're being fatigued, you end up the day kind of, dropping in productivity. And that's a
Mm,
consequence of your body feeling that toll and not feeling great. When you end up more similar to how you started, you're actually both living the day feeling better, safer, and
mm,
you end up doing a little bit more, right? And being more efficient kind of as part of that. So that's usually quantified around the 4 to 7% increase productivity. And then again, I was mentioning the turnover and retention benefits that
mm,
come from implementing safety programs. And we have customers that have done a trailing 12 months analysis around turnover and retention, and they've seen up to somewhere between that 15 to 25% kind of improvement
mm,
around turnover. Now that's really hard to measure, right? Because it could be affected by many different things. But consistently, we're hearing the HR teams, our customers, that they do end up keeping their workforce in a higher number than kind of ever before.
mm,
So when you add all that up, it ends up being a safety initiative that pays for itself in
mm.
3 to 6 months.
Oh wow.
And
Yeah.
that's I think I mentioned, Kevin, but we're a subscription, right? So you pay year
Mm,
over year, and it pays for itself in 3 to 6 months. The rest of the year is upside in terms of those benefits and the value that our customers get. So it's not like you have to do this investment for like a multi-year kind of
mm.
return. It's just that 3 to 6 month period, depending on how your sites look and how you're deploying the
Mm.
tech.
Interesting, interesting. Yeah, and I think that from a business perspective, obviously you want to keep your workers safe. Hopefully businesses want to keep their workers safe and care about that aspect. But seeing those also benefits in terms of productivity increase and like you said retention too, I think
Yeah.
is a huge point, right? Because it's there's so much talk about labor challenges, getting enough labor for warehouses, but it's one thing to get the labor and then it's another thing to keep the labor too as well. So, anything that can help boost that retention, I think is a huge win too as well. And just making your workers
Yeah.
happier and feeling better overall, I think is going to have a ton of benefits there. So, you mentioned there on the ROI perspective is like 3 to 6 months potentially, depending on how your operation is set up, which is really good. But I guess tell us from an initial perspective, right? Because I think that if we look at safety, we look at injury prevention, a lot of times businesses or operations, they don't necessarily see or feel the cost in a sense until something happens, right? So it's
Hmm.
kind of like, oh, nothing has happened. So why am I going to invest that money right now? So I guess tell us, how do you kind of approach that type of maybe defense or argument in
Hmm.
the sense to say like, well, I'm not really having like an injury problem right now, so why would I invest in something like this? I mean, how do you kind of show them up front like what those benefits are going to be and, help them realize ROI even if they haven't really had like an injury problem yet?
Right. And a lot of our customers are move a lot of material every day,
Mm,
and those workers at a high risk of injury from the moment when they put a step on the warehouse.
mm,
So it's actually pretty normal to see. You have new hire classes coming in every week, and within those first 3 months of you're a new hire, you come in the building um, to you almost like kind of graduate on that onboarding program. That's
mm,
where a lot of the injuries happen in warehouses. There is also other people get injured as well. But when you focus on the analysis around both experienced selectors as well as new hires, you can see that return of investment pretty quickly on
mm,
eliminating injuries for those new hires that maybe their bodies weren't conditioned to do their job, and you start kind of like going up in terms of job demand and kind of your back doing more and more effort until something kind of breaks. If you invert that trend with technology, those injuries will, they just don't show up. And so
Mm,
within a period of 3 months, you can actually get those injury, the dollars that you had reserved for those injuries, suddenly you're just not utilizing because you're not seeing those injuries come up at a high
mm,
frequency like they used to. So if you pick a lot of the harder jobs, higher injury rate jobs, you actually see that in just a matter of a few months. But then there is also the productivity gains. Those are pretty immediate.
mm,
So we do analysis like 12 weeks prior to deployment to 12 weeks post deployment. And you see that 5 to 7% kind of benefit most of the time, and that already pays for the technology itself. So that you can start looking at that kind of every week. And then the
mm,
turnover retention, yeah, that takes kind of like 6 months to 9 months to be able to quantify. Uh, but we're talking months in terms of getting that
yeah.
initial investment, and in a matter of weeks you'll see the worker reaction injuries not being as prevalent, and you suddenly are getting more predictable
Mm,
and more throughput kind of through the end of the day.
mm. Very interesting there, and I think it is interesting to see that quick ROI on it, and I think obviously you have this out there in the market, so proven, and I think it's really interesting too, just how it's addressing this problem and how big the problem is. I mean, lifting 30 to
Yeah.
50,000 pounds a day is huge. I mean, that's like a ton of strain and stress going on your back and just your body overall. So very interesting to talk to you here, Ignacio, and learn more about Verve Motion. Now, as we look towards the future of Verve Motion, what's in store for the future? What's up next for Verve Motion?
Yeah, pretty exciting future for us. A lot of our focus right now as well is, we have a lot of data analytics coming out from our customers, and
Mm,
we're providing now more and more value to our customers around analytics, around all that data, and we can use a lot of that data from movement to improve their safety practices, but also be able to predict in some ways what's going to happen, in 6 months from now, and trying to act today. And that's a combination of knowing a lot about how people are moving, but also understanding, their operation and their footprint. So you can now go to a warehouse like, oh, this is where a lot of our incidents are happening, and try to do engineering controls around that. Or you can do coaching from day one when a new hire comes in. So there is a lot of that analytics around both safety and operational efficiency, which our customers are very focused on. And then two is we started with the back because that's the number one injury, and we want to eliminate it
mm,
first. But then number two is the shoulder, the knee, and so
mm.
in our future there will be devices to eliminate those injuries as well, or drastically mitigate it. So a lot of what's coming, data analytics, software updates and upgrades, as well as new devices. And one of the things, Kevin, that I mentioned around the subscription is our customers get a lot of those updates and upgrades naturally. So whenever
Mm.
we come up with a new analytic, a new software, a new more responsive type control, we will we push a button and our customers get that latest and greatest kind of updates and upgrades,
Interesting.
which is usually exciting to see.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, and I think it's very interesting. The approach there and what's coming in the future. I mean, I think that makes a ton of sense to you've tackled the back. Now, how do we figure out how to do some of these other now
Yeah.
like with any Pareto, you tackle the biggest problem and then you go to the next biggest problem, right? And so on and so on. So I think it'd be very interesting to see how that continues to grow. And I love that, your customers can get those updates too as part of the subscription. I think that's like one of the great benefits of having a sort of subscription based product is that you're always going to have the latest in that sense. So very interesting to learn from you here today, Ignacio, and learn more about Verve Motion as well. Really appreciate you coming on the show. If people are feeling like their back hurts right now and they want to get Verve Motion into their operation or find out more information, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. Go to vervemotion.com. You can learn a lot about our products, how we deploy them. There is a section around requesting a demo. And so, if you'd like to see how this feels at a warehouse on your own workers, happy to set that up. We also have a YouTube channel with case studies, testimonials, as well as videos on how it works. So that's usually a good resource, and feel free to reach out as well on LinkedIn.
All right, great. And we'll definitely put all that information at thenewwarehouse.com as well so people can easily find it. So, Ignacio, thank you very much for your time on the show today.
Thank you, Kevin. Great spending time with you. And next time you come to Cambridge, you should come visit.
Sure, absolutely. Hey guys, thank you so much for tuning into today's video here on our YouTube channel, The New Warehouse Podcast, and I appreciate you tuning in. If you liked what you saw, make sure you subscribe to our channel, and if you like this video in particular, make sure you like it as well. And if you want to get this great t-shirt that you see in the video behind me, Warehouses Are Sexy, head to warehousesAreSexy.com and get your own.